Hey boys, we've had a bit of time to reflect on the game now. Feel like everyone's slept on it, woken up, and we can kind of digest what actually happened yesterday. A bit more in detail without so much emotions attached. Obviously, it was a terrible performance by the team, by the manager, and also it kind of just reflects on the overall hierarchy and recruitment involved in Chelsea overall, right? So we saw a lot of holes in our team and a lot of problems. Maresca obviously came out after the game in the press conference and gave some comments. In my video yesterday, I did that straight after the game. So I didn't have didn't have the time to see what he actually said. So we can go through now and see what has come out, right? So it was better to let Mbeumo score than getting the red card. We still had 95 minutes to play. Robert Sanchez is aware of that. It's difficult, but if you ask me, I prefer to be one goal down after 5 minutes than one player down. I mean, obviously this is true, right? But again, it just shows the sort of decision making from our goalkeeping end. Jorgensen isn't good enough. He's only ever going to be okay as a backup. I feel like we were interested in Mike Magnan, right? We should have been interested in another keeper, just someone who can challenge Sanchez a bit more. So if we do need to bench Sanchez, at least we got a good body to come in because I don't feel like Jorgensen is that level. He's only ever going to be a decent backup keeper, but he certainly can't be someone who's challenging and who I could see maybe in a couple of years starting for Chelsea, right? So I think in the summer, Maresca did want a goalkeeper. He wanted, not necessarily someone to replace Sanchez because Sanchez did warrant to start. He had a good end to the season. He was good in the Club World Cup. So look, he wasn't awful, right? But Maresca made it quite clear he wanted a goalkeeper. The sporting directors and everyone involved, they didn't want to pay the extra money for Mike or go out and get a replacement. So we've moved on and now we've got the two goalkeepers. And personally, I think they see Mike Penders as our next goalkeeper, right? And because they've already invested in him and he's on loan at Strasbourg, they're pretty, their stance was Maresca, work with what you've got. And you never know, maybe Mike Penders is that guy next season, which I think is just completely throwing away this season and what we worked on last year as well, right? So for me, it doesn't really make much sense. The reason why is because they attacked with 5 players often, and we needed to defend all the width, so we decided to go to a back 5. The other one, Garnacho was ready to come on, but then Wes asked for a change because he was tired. And then also, with the red card, it was a red card, but we should have had a penalty for Joao Pedro as well. So I don't feel like people are really talking about that too much, to be honest. We had the whole drama with Josh King and his goal being overruled, and that was in the media for like a week or two, and they even gave it goal of the month. Fulham, even though it wasn't a goal, it got disallowed. So I don't really understand, the whole drama with that. And it just shows, we've probably sacrificed a couple decisions off the back of that. When I saw that, yes, it's soft, but he dangles his leg out. There is contact. He doesn't get the ball. So for me, that is a penalty. And that's not even being, overly biased with my Chelsea bias. If that happened against us, similar to what Caicedo did against Harry Kane, it's a soft penalty, but you can see what Harry Kane's done is smart, and it is a penalty. And I feel it's the same with João Pedro. Mazraoui comes across, there's clear contact, his knee hits him. Is it enough for him to go down? No, but this is the modern game, and if there's contact in the box, it is a penalty. So I don't get why that wasn't looked at more. Certainly there isn't a big media drama after the game, and they're showing a million different replays and really showing it, slowing it down, right? And look, Manchester United, they really robbed us. We didn't get a penalty, just like they did with us in the Josh King situation. So it is what it is, right? And then, for me, this is really bizarre. He says Garnacho was ready to come on, but then in the same sense, if I bring up the game here, look, Garnacho was ready to come on. Look, you didn't sub him on, and instead you subbed on Tyreek George. So you say Wesley Fofana was tired, so you brought on Malo Gusto. Why did Tyreek George come on then? You can't tell me that was purely tactical. We were trying to ship this guy out of the club. We wanted him to. He almost went to Fulham on loan. We wanted him to, we wanted Roma to buy him for 20, 25 million. So this isn't someone either he or the hierarchy saw as a Chelsea player or had a Chelsea future. Yet he's playing more than the guy we've gone out and spent 55, 60 million on. spend that on Gittin, spend 40 on Garnacho. These guys don't feature, but the guy we tried to get rid of does. And he's even playing, a couple games more. Doesn't really make sense. I don't know. I don't know if Maresca is almost turning into a Conte kind of character, and he's going to be stubborn. And yes, he's fallen out with the board maybe because he wanted some players, they didn't bring them in, so he's going to go against them and sort of like, oh, you wanted to get rid of Tyreek George, you brought me Gittins. Who knows? He probably didn't want to get Gittins, right? That was probably a Chelsea hierarchy, sporting director kind of purchase. So he's going to keep them on the bench. He's going to bring on, Tyreek George. And it's the same with the other sort of substitutions. I thought they were really bizarre yesterday. And to be honest, it's unlike Maresca. I don't want to be too reactionary. Yes, we've had a bad week. Obviously, back-to-back losses is never fun, especially when we really want to be pushing in all the competitions, right? But I think it's important not to overreact too much. I think Chelsea fans love to be big, drama babies in the moment. These last 3 fixtures aren't great. The club's in a sort of a bit of a toxic atmosphere, right? But if you really think about it, yes, the Brentford one was poor, but we rotated and we should have won that game, to be honest. But the United one, look, it's a bad team, it's a bad manager, but it's Old Trafford. We haven't won this since 2013, And think of all the great teams, we won the league under Conte, and all these great teams who have gone there and they haven't been able to win. So, yes, we lost, and even with a draw, it would have been disappointing. But I think it's more the manner in which we lost. Like, don't get me wrong, it was a disgusting performance, absolutely embarrassing from the top down. But again, it's Old Trafford, we've got a terrible record. And then it's the same with the Allianz, right? This wasn't a terrible performance. I think we did okay. We gave them the goals, though. They didn't have to work too hard in that game, right? And we gave Harry Kane a pen. We gave him an easier shooting opportunity, and Harry Kane is always going to score, especially the form he's in. He's just got a hat-trick yesterday as well, right? So it's the Allianz. They haven't lost there for like 6 years, I don't think, something crazy. So they haven't lost at the Allianz in the Champions League for ages. And again, this is a team who mostly was used to playing in the Conference League. Apart from Reece James, no one's really played in the Champions League. So what I would say, if I bring this team up, this team is lacking a spine and real sort of central figures who are important to the team. If I think of sort of leaders and characters in the squad, I'm only looking at really Cucurella, Reece James, Caicedo, and to an extent Enzo. You can tell he's a sort of leadership figure, but his performances certainly aren't warranting that. But I think across the back line, Colwell, you could argue was that sort of centre-back leadership sort of position. But with him injured, Maresca wanted a replacement. They chose to not go out and get him. We do look lost at the back. No one's commanding that back line. As much of a leader Reece James is, he's not a centre-back. He's not that towering figure. He's not, like a Van Dijk, a John Terry, that sort of figure. Thiago Silva. Clearly the man at the back needs to organise. We don't have any of that. And you can see that in the chances we're conceding as well, right? To be honest, we're not getting overrun in a lot of the games. We're not, looking like we could be 4-5-0 down. Like, we don't look really defensively weak, but we switch off and teams get important chances from that. And at the top level, that's really going to punish you. And that's what we're seeing. We're giving teams like Bayern Munich one chance and Harry Kane is going to score it. This isn't Noah's Ark. This isn't the Conference League. If we're going to give these top teams chances, they're going to score. And for me, we should have looked to rectify that in the transfer market. I'm going to say it every video, but it's true. We should have gone out and got Hincapie. I don't know why we let him go to Arsenal. We didn't really need to bring in Gittins, to be honest. We could have just kept Madueke, and then, we could have said to Hincapie, look, Colwell's out for the season. You're a sort of backup rotation option at Arsenal. You're going to be full-time left centre-back at Chelsea. And just go out and give him 50-55 mil or whatever it was. But we chose not to do that. We chose to get young potential attackers, and we didn't sort out the back. So, moving on anyway. Okay, so got here as well. Totally believe that he's been dealt a bad hand this summer, but Maresca, game management today and the substitutions have been nothing short of dreadful, and I kind of share the same sentiment as well. Doesn't trust Gittins, not look to Buonanotte, the creative alternative to Palmer once. Uses George up front, who he tried to sell instead of Gay when they brought back. Maresca is just fuming with the window, I believe. And this is, what I was saying earlier. Is he going down a sort of Conte route? You can tell he probably didn't agree with these signings. He doesn't have much of a say. And to be honest, I'm not the biggest opponent to the manager not having much of a say in the transfer window. What I think is more important is this kind of profile of player we bring in. But if Maresca's saying, I need this kind of profile here, and he's not necessarily saying, I want this player, that and bringing out a name or whatever, I think that's more important. So if Maresca says, Colwell's out, find me a suitable left-footed, sort of commanding centre-back who we can bring in. So he's not saying, I want, you're bringing out two names, we have to get him, or I don't get him, I'm going to throw my toys out of the basket. I'm going to really, get upset about it. It's more the profile. And I think we ignored that. You can kind of see Maresca didn't want us to bring in these kind of wingers. Buonanotte on loan was really weird. Yes, he looks like a kind of tidy player, but this the guy who's going to be back up to Cole Palmer? Cole Palmer and Buonanotte? Buonanotte, who is second choice at Brighton, and he's going to be the backup to Cole Palmer. Cole Palmer. Like, the difference in playing ability and level is just so ridiculous. We flirt with Xavi Simons all summer, and we don't get him. We bid for Fermin Lopez, and then we don't pursue it any further. So it's quite clear we wanted this kind of caliber of player to be back up to Palmer, someone else to play that creative 10 spot. And it just didn't happen, which I just find super bizarre. And we just settled for Buonanotte on loan. So we completely flopped in the transfer market. You're now seeing that in these games as well. It's showing, right? And I also saw this, which is quite interesting. So just so everyone knows, Cole Palmer has been injured since before the Club World Cup. They've been giving him pain injections to pay. Nothing bad showed up on scans, but he's had continuous discomfort in his groin and it's not gone away. Make of that as you will. So, if the club know this, and this is probably why they were looking at Xavi Simons and Fermin Lopez, because they anticipate maybe Cole Palmer isn't going to be fully fit for the first part of the season, or he's going to be injured, or whatever it may be. Why is it the case we went out and got Buonanotte on loan? If anything, that makes the Buonanotte signing even worse, because they know Cole Palmer has this sort of niggly injury, which is keeping him from being 100%, right? And they settle for Buonanotte. If anything, it makes that whole situation worse. Xavi Simons, he's playing on the left for Spurs and he's not looking great there. Because he's not a winger. He is a 10. And if you haven't watched him, you wouldn't know that, but he is a 10. Yes, he can play on the left, but he's not nearly as effective. He's another one of these sort of half wingers, a 10 winger kind of hybrid. And I feel like he would have been a much better fit for Chelsea if we're going to play him in that 10 spot. Fair enough, Fermin Lopez, we probably would have had to pay like 70 mil for. I don't think Barca would have let him go for any cheaper than that. But there's other alternatives. There's loads of players out there who can fit that, position. And again, it's that profile. So, look, we needed a keeper. Whether it be first choice or someone competing with Sanchez, we should have gone out and get a keeper. Yes, Sanchez was in good form, but we know he can have these lapses of concentration, get a red card, give away a penalty. We know that. We've seen that. And it's quite naive to think that wouldn't reoccur, right? Jorgensen isn't good enough to be a backup. Wasn't commanding enough on the second goal, right? And neither were any of the centre-backs. We let Luke Shaw run into our box and win a header. Luke Shaw. And we've got, the goalkeeper not even jumping to attempt. The centre-backs are ball watching. So, that goal was shocking. If you rewatch that again, and you'll see how bad that goal was to concede, right? It wasn't great. And the same here, Joshua Chompiong. Since having a really positive performance against Crystal Palace, we haven't seen him once. And what's been more bizarre is we haven't had like even a 5-minute cameo. So I'm not quite sure what the message is here. And we can just go through it though, without, everyone just wanting to sort of hate watch, or, everyone calling for Maresca's head. Maresca, he's not that guy. We need to get rid of him. I think we need to step back a bit and sort of look at our last sort of fixtures, right? Look at these runs. Look, they're not bad. Towards the end of the season, we had a great finish. And here, look, pretty much all green. We won nearly every game here, apart from, the opening game to Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace are a good team, though. And especially when they still had Eze, looking at that team, it is quite hard. So, yes, it was a disappointing performance. But first game of the season, it's a draw. We didn't lose. And then, look, we came out, beat West Ham 5-1. Again, the first half wasn't acceptable. Obviously, at one point we were 2-1 down, and then Fulkrug had one of his goals disallowed. But look, we scored 5 goals. Wasn't a bad performance. And then obviously we got here Chelsea-Fulham. We won this game 2-0. Obviously Josh King scored, got disallowed, and there was a few more. We did get some favourable decisions, but we never get loads of favourable decisions. As you could see yesterday, we could have got a penalty, didn't get a sniff in, right? So you can see here, wasn't a bad performance. Like, we weren't great, but look, created 2.3 XG. We won 2-0. Most teams are moving on with that, right? And then now we get into the bad fixtures, right? And to be honest, you're only as good as your last game, right? As soon as we probably beat Lincoln, everyone's going to be, sort of positive again. It's just typical in the sports space, right? Now, we should have won this game. The first half was quite rotated. You could see Wanate, Gittins, Hato, they were quite at it at this level, in this moment in time. But again, Brentford away, we've always kind of struggled at that stadium. Then we've got the Allianz and we've got Old Trafford. So I think if you just take a step back, we shouldn't be too reactionary and too negative. Like, yes, these last 2 games haven't been good enough. But what's more important for me now, I don't really care about the Lincoln away game. We should play a fully rotated team for that and win. But what's really important is these next 2 home games. Brighton and Benfica, to be honest, we have to win both. And if we don't win both, it's only going to put more pressure on Maresca, and it's only going to get more toxic as well. So Spurs had a really good performance against Brighton. They didn't win, but if you watch that game, they were really good, dominated them. They should have won. And I anticipate we should go out and we should win this game, and we need to win it comfortably. We need to get some morale back into the team, back into the stadium. We've played a lot of games away from home now. It will be nice to play at home. Hopefully the fans get behind the boys as well, but they need to put in a good performance, because if they play like they did against Old Trafford and United, and they play like that against Brighton or Benfica, boy, is it going to be toxic. So that's the sort of post-mortem from the game. I think, look, it was a disgusting performance. It was awful, right? Like, certainly not trying to defend it, but people calling for Maresca's head, I think is silly. Just look at our previous fixtures. We haven't been terrible. But what's more important are these next 3 games. I mean, Lincoln's not that important, but we should win it anyway, right? But what's really important is Brighton and Benfica. Now, if we don't win both of those, then my stance will change a little bit. But I'm going to reserve my judgment. And we go again on Tuesday. So tomorrow, I'll drop the preview, who I think will play. I'd like to be quite, heavily rotated. Maybe a few academy boys can get some cameos in the second half, something like that. Maybe we see Schwimmwaker, but I'll cover that tomorrow. But otherwise, that's the video for today, boys. Drop a like, subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow. Peace.